right, hold on. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, welcome to the Godfo Universe podcast. I am Josh Adams, co creator of the Godfo Universe. I'm here with Dan Evans. Say hi, Dan.
Hey man, the other co-creator.
And together we've been working for, man, like over a decade on this universe of a mixture of sci fi and fantasy and horror and all the things that we love books, comics, music, games, you name it, in this universe.
I tag everything as sci-fi, horror, goth, anime, manga, comic.
That's accurate.
Yeah, every time everything on Instagram is tagged as that. And
All the things
yeah,
that you want in one place.
and speaking of cool, fun topics, today we're discussing school shootings,
Pew pew.
which, as a preliminary, we want to say that the recent Nashville attack is god awful, and our hearts go out to all the victims, and that's you can't imagine that kind of horror. And
No, and I'm as a elementary school teacher. I don't know if there's a day that goes by that when I go to work that I don't think about it at some point during the day. That you know, what if something happens right now? I'm in this hall. What do I do if something happens right now? Like it's crazy that the world we live in makes us live like with that mindset of like what if a shooter comes in, but that's where we're at.
yeah, and it's not gonna
So yeah,
stop.
anytime I see that stuff, no, it's not, and legislation is not going to stop it,
Mm-mm.
and whining about it's not going to stop it. But every time this happens, it just drives it home again. Uh, just how insecure our lives really can be. Like we think we're safe and we're not. And then also that idea too of just like how quick someone can be gone.
Yeah, and we might go on some rants today, and that's fine because that's what
Oh
this is
yeah.
for. And but we wanted to open it. We didn't pre-talk about this, but I know we both have our hearts in the same place with it. Like just acknowledging the horror of it, and that it doesn't need to be politicized, and it doesn't need to be ideologicalized. You don't need to stand on like the graves of children to push your agenda.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Um. So there was another school shooting. This one got media attention because it was a little different. It was a woman that did it, which is women have done
Very
mass shootings before,
It's very
but
statistically it's an anomaly.
yeah, and it's so weird because and this isn't trying to get into the politics of it, but a mass shooting is like I forget it, but it's like classified as like 3 or 4 people or more. I think and like those
Hmm.
happen unfortunately all the time. They're just not politicized or media sized because, I mean, it ranges everything from guy goes crazy like in an apartment complex and kills people that got in his way to his girlfriend or something, or got gang shootouts and stuff. Like that's technically how it is, and so that statistic of who
Hmm.
does it is actually way more diversified than we like to think, and that's a scary thought.
Hmm.
That isn't good, but
Yeah, it's definitely not comforting.
yeah, it just gets worse when it's a
But
school.
well, yeah, well, but even the school shootings have become such a big problem, and I know they've existed to some degree for a long time, but I think all of us would go back to Columbine as the first one that like really
Yeah,
landed on the map of everybody's like, oh my goodness, this is such a horrible thing to happen.
yeah,
Um,
because
but
it's
since
so
then,
many victims.
yeah, it was so tragic. But since Columbine, the number of these things every year has just really continued to climb, and it's horrible how often this happens.
Yeah,
And in spite of all the precautions that we take, it keeps happening.
well, that's what I want to get into is two of those things. Is Columbine was different because it was students who were currently attending it, which was
Hmm.
two things. It was such a shock because no one expected it, and that's also like why it was so efficient. because it wasn't some
Mhm.
random person that they saw approaching. It was two guys with backpacks or
Well, and
duffel bags or whatever.
it wasn't something that happened. It happens regularly now. I hate that we have to say that, but it
Yeah.
happens regularly now. At the time, that wasn't something that was on anybody's radar. You weren't.
Hmm.
Nobody was expecting that.
Yeah, and there'd been
That
some
wasn't
before.
a regular occurrence. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there'd been some before, but they were usually an isolated incident.
Yeah.
Is some kid brought a gun to school and
Killed
attacked
somebody.
one
Yeah.
or two people.
Yeah.
Yeah, killed a specific person or a teacher or
Hmm.
another student versus those boys came in and they wanted to kill everybody they could.
Yeah. Wonton
And that just
Rampage. Yeah.
yeah, and it just never crossed people's minds, I think at the time that that was a thing that somebody would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it
But now
seems
it
just
happens regularly.
purposeless. And
Mhm.
well, in the yeah, there's a lot to go into, so let's just go into it. You can't fix evil in the human heart. Guns have existed for centuries, and we didn't have school shootings. What we did, if we did, they were very few and far, as we just discussed, like very
Mhm.
strange kind of one-off cases for the most part, like not like mass kind of shootings. It seems that this a weird psychosis has changed, and how we deal with things has changed. Like I personally can't help but feel like there's a hand behind a lot of this stuff. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy person, but just the way that there's a like a problem reaction and solution always seems to be the same. That tells me
Mhm.
that this seems kind of, if not orchestrated, then at least opportunized every time now.
I think that's a better way
Yeah.
to look at it. Um, I and you know how much of a conspiracy theorist I am. I
Yeah.
am a tinfoil hat nut. But I'm not one of those people that'll sit back and say that Sandy Hook and
Yeah.
some of these other things were false flags or anything. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
believe that.
Go ahead, not to interrupt, but
But
with everything, we have to kind of say that, like, I don't think any of these things are hoaxes. I don't think any of these
right,
things are that kind of stuff like Alex Jones got accused of saying and said. I think they're all tragedies of the highest order anytime a child is killed.
mhm. I do think, and I'm just gonna say it how I feel it. I don't feel like there's any reason to apologize for what I feel. I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm just saying this is how it seems. I do think that people on both political parties, both sides of it, I think they love it when these things happen.
Attitude.
I think they love it when there's a shooting because, like you said, like they have an opportunity. There's nothing that sells an agenda better than a dead child,
Yep.
and they love it when this happens. Now they would say that they don't,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, you can see them back there rubbing their hands together every time this happens because it's already like
Mm-hmm.
the spin doctors go to work before like the dust settles on these
Yeah,
things.
before the blood
I
dries.
mean, yeah, like when you look at this most recent one, you know, I can tell you for a fact that every article I looked at that day, the next day, those first couple of days, I did not hear victims' names. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't hear any of that stuff. But day one, I heard this was the shooter was a member of had been at that Christian school before, and that the shooter was a transgender individual. That was in the news
Mm-hmm. Their face
immediately.
was all
Uh,
over day one.
immediately, and I saw, and I'm not going to say which network it was because I don't remember right off, but it was one of the mainstream networks. I saw one of the guys reporting on it, and the first thing he said in reporting on it was essentially to point the finger and say, well, this is because of all the legislations and stuff about
Mm-hmm. Trans
transgender people and
trans
and
kids and all
and
that kind of stuff.
right, and to immediately make it, well, this was just, it's society, it's conservative society that has caused this, that they're to blame, and this
Mm-hmm.
person, like, they made a victim out of the killer
I
immediately.
have never seen media run cover for a shooter before, much less ever that I thought it would be to this
Mm-mm.
degree. I have never seen that happen, and it's sickening. I don't care what this
Well, I mean,
person
and I don't
is
know.
or was or what they thought they were, thought they could be. I do not care. Like, they killed children. Like, that's
Exactly. That's the end of the
the
line for
last
me
thing they were.
too.
I don't care who they were or who they became. I don't care what their dead name is or what their new name is. I just care that what they died as a murderer, and
Right.
society should treat
But
them as
see,
such.
the first thing that you hear from the White House press secretary
Mm-hmm.
is that she says our hearts and our minds and all this go out to the members of the trans community who are being targeted and being,
Yeah.
mistreated,
Well,
and,
what's
the
the community?
president.
Where show me on a map where the community is.
Right.
Yeah, that's what gets on my nerves too. Like, I'm a Christian. I'm not part of the Christian community. No one can put their hand on it. I'm a part of the church, and the Christ is the only one that puts his mark and brand on it. You're not, just
Right.
because however you choose a lifestyle, or if you believe you don't choose it, you're not part of a community because it. This is collectivism from day one. Anyone who tries, if you're trans and someone tries to make you part of a community and a collective, you should like tell them to get bent. Like, because they're trying
Right.
to use you. I think you can.
Right.
I think personally you should be able to do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not gonna tell you to go be
Right.
part of a collective and try to use you politically. But whatever.
Hmm. It's sickening to me that that's the direction. It's like it's already, the White House and the president have already made this decision to get out in front of this and go ahead and identify with that group and that agenda, rather than to
Well,
send out their condolences to the families
and
that lost their child.
how sickening is it to do that to, like, trans individuals by equating this shooter with with someone who has nothing to do with it? Because when you say this about the trans
Well,
community, it's like you're saying other people did
that we
this.
did it.
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
conflating it.
Well, and
What an insult.
immediately, yeah. What and we've seen that tactic, that manipulation works, because within days of this whole thing happening, like the very next day, they had these major riots in Nashville at the Capitol buildings and stuff, and at their like state buildings and stuff there in Nashville,
Because people don't
of
have jobs.
trans activists. Yeah, people. Well, and see, that's where I agree with you. I don't believe that somebody is in the background, like, orchestrating this stuff. But the second something like this happens, people like George Soros and others start bankrolling all these protesters and activists to kick in and start making noise and making it harder to deal with.
Well, this going on. I mean, if we just say it, I do think there's two things with this. It's been confirmed that a tons of shooters were known by the FBI before it happened. They were watching these guys. And two, that some parents have caught the FBI trying to radicalize their mentally ill child.
Yeah, that's
That
been
has been
proven.
proven. We've
Yeah, that's
also
not
seen
speculation.
no,
It's not theorizing. That is stuff that has happened.
and that's a dangerous fact to have to deal with. Now, when you
Yeah.
choose to go murder children, I mean, I lose all sympathy for you. I mean, Jesus can decide your ultimate fate. That's not for me to judge. But
Hmm.
from this side of eternity, speaking as I have to take off my Christian hat, speaking as an American, I'm gonna switch to that just to do this. Like, I mean, I lose all sympathy for you. Like you, I don't care
Hmm.
what happened to you. Like, if this girl was, I don't even think they ever confirmed it. If she was bullied at the school, I don't care if somebody slapped her in the face 10 seconds before she went to do it. that's
Yeah, that child
I
didn't
don't
slap her in the
care.
face.
Yeah, I don't care what
Those
happened to
children
you.
didn't
You don't
hurt
get
her.
to kill children. But
Yeah.
here's my thing, man, and
If you want to kill children, you have to do it the legal way.
you have to you have to get pregnant
You got to
first.
go through the proper
Yeah,
channels. Yeah.
find a wiener and um
If you can find one. If you can
it
find
always
one.
but it always goes like this. It's always like mass shooting, media stuff, gun grabbers, and then the opposite of that. It's always that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing, man. If the government that you're already having to pay out your butt taxes to already is not trying to defend your children, them taking your guns is not going to lead to them defending your children. What they're saying is
I
it's your
agree.
fault. It's your fault this is happening. We can't do anything with the government, even though we, at gunpoint, can take your house if you don't pay taxes on the land that you own.
Yeah.
They can use all the force in the world to enforce their will. Their will is not to protect children, because if it were, they would be protecting children. And I put this on like our socials, or on mine, I should say, not ours, but like there are strategic experts. Like I know some of these guys, and to throw this on the other side, I know trans people. Some of them are my friends, not the whole community, because I don't know the whole community. I don't know the whole community of anybody. But
Agreed.
there are
I
guys,
agree.
there are strategists who can look at a new or existing building and say, here's 5 things to protect that from an entire squad of troops without using guns. I can have you outfit this building, no cosmetic changes really, to where no one's getting in. It's not happening.
Yeah.
They have to do that on the fly in third world countries, and they do it. And you telling me that if politicians wanted to protect children, they'd be protected. And we know that even from this one, because the shooter supposedly picked a different school, saw that it had security, and went to this one because the slightest resistance. That means, ironically, that's what you teach children is like, or that's what you teach teachers about children is like basically the proximity of authority. Like if you're just there, like in certain areas, like walking around, you know this, they act differently. They're less likely to act out. If there was just the slightest change, we'd see a huge decrease in this. The only thing you're going to see from people like giving up the Second Amendment is tyranny. That's all you ever see. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And and anytime this stuff happens, they always bring up the whole, if we had stronger laws against this stuff, it wouldn't happen. It's already against the law to take a gun into a school. It's already against the law to shoot people and shoot children. Laws would not have stopped. Newer laws are not going to stop this stuff from happening.
It's easier to get a gun illegally than it is to do what that person did, or it should be. Like it's harder to drive across town to do all of that stuff and all that kind of pseudo planning and walk in there. That takes way more will than it is to get a gun illegally.
Yeah, and which I'm pretty sure the guns she had were purchased legally.
In what other society throughout all of history has it been that you got your tribe or your village, right? And you got someone within it, a threat within it, or a threat without it, and that person does something wrong, and everybody goes, "Hey, we need to take everyone's swords."
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Like unless there's a tyrant. It's not like you got people coming in like to a place they shouldn't be. No, what you would say is, "Hey, we're going to put some guards outside the sheep, or we're going to put some guards outside the schoolhouse." Here's my thing. Government, if you want to fix this, which they don't, if they do, what you say is, "Okay, we'll take some of the billions of dollars we're laundering from you guys, and we'll pay either. Why don't you just pay policemen? Hire more policemen to just patrol. They don't even have to be inside the school. Patrol it
because they want to defund the police. Dan.
Exactly, or get some parents, or fund like a parents like volunteer security program. You want to see somebody take down a shooter in like 2.5 seconds? Get a parent of a kid in that school. That's what happened at Uvalde or whatever it was called. However you say that. And people people jumped all over that one saying, "Where's the good guys with the gun?" Like there was only one good guy with a gun. And that's the guy that got up from his haircut, got his friend's shotgun, went in there and killed the guy.
and
There
ended that
wasn't.
threat.
That was the only good guy with a gun. All the cops that didn't go in, they're not good guys. They were just fat, lazy, bad guys with guns. How do I know that? Because they
Yeah,
didn't stop someone from killing children. That's how you know they're not good
exactly,
guys. They were cowards.
exactly. Well, and let's, because the last thing I want to do is to take this and turn it into a debate about what it, at the
Exactly.
heart of it, what it really isn't is. So my thing is this: like, I know that there's no stopping this from happening on a large scale, because it's going to keep happening, because again, the powers that be, and they want it to keep happening, because it's
The media needs
especially
it
when
to
it gets
happen.
yeah, yeah, they need it to happen, and I know that's not changing. But my thing is, how do we look at this situation, and stop it from happening on an emotional level and on a human being level? Not, society is a whole different creature, but as people, you know what's the why behind these people choosing that this is what they want to do? And you and I both know that we grew up with, anytime something like this happened, there was always immediately, let's put the blame on video games, let's put the blame on Marilyn Manson
Whatever they
records,
wanted to
let's put the
control at the
blame on,
time.
yeah, it's these violent comic books. It's like, and so you get these big, uh I guess, tirades, and people, activist groups and
Hmm.
parent groups and stuff that want to go blame some creative piece, something art, some piece of art, and whether you like the art or not, it was created by a human being. It's art. You don't have to like it, but it's art.
Yeah.
They want to blame art and say, well, we just need to censor this stuff more. We need to regulate this stuff more because it's creating monsters. There's never been a comic book, a video game, a movie, a song, a record played backwards. There's never been a piece of art that created a monster that would kill people. The people who do this already want to do it.
Hmm.
They already want to do it. There may be something they listen to or look at or bring in, consume, I guess, that maybe encourages them what they already want to do, or
Hmm.
maybe lights a fire
Okay,
under
yeah, that's
something
what
that they're already
propaganda's
planning to
for.
do.
That's what propaganda's for.
Exactly.
That is to weaponize the darkness, bitterness, and hatred of people. Yeah.
Exactly. But to say that, violence or any of these topics are not allowed in art because they may lead to somebody doing something like this, I mean, I've never been able to wrap my head around that idea of let's blame art for murder.
I think it's a lack of acceptance of responsibility. Parents don't want to accept that their child was a monster, and as we discussed this before, it's not always the parents' fault. We always kind of jump to that, and it's like, man, parents can be fine, decent people and raise terrible kids. You know,
Hmm.
see it all the time, especially with college kids. um, but I mean,
Yeah,
I actually posted
I mean
about
it's
this on our blog, The Road to Apollyon 20XX, and y'all can read that. Josh and I both contribute to that on our website. But the fact that human nature is being able to look at a guy who was arrested, gave himself up to the authorities, and as he's being crucified says, Father, forgive them. They can look at that guy and be like, oh, he wants me to kill people.
yeah, how do you make that leap?
They do it, though. Yeah, they've done it before,
Yeah,
and
we make the leaps that we want to make.
yeah.
And I've never felt like you could put any of the blame from Columbine or any of these other Sandy Hook, any of these things. I've never felt like you could put the blame on the art that those kids or people, individuals consumed, because I mean, there's the reality is everything that they consumed has been consumed by millions of others without that result.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you know, correlation is not causation.
Yeah. And
But
the exception only proves the rule.
exactly,
Yeah. Well, that's the
you know,
argument that is rightfully used when it's like people attack like certain sects of Islam, and people are like, well, there's like 3 billion or however many or 1 billion Muslims in the world. If they wanted a holy war, they'd have it. And that
exactly.
also works for Christianity and every other religion. But when anti-Semites try to
Mhm.
go off about Jews controlling things, it's like, man, there's like a ridiculous amount of Jewish people in the world. If they wanted a holy war, they'd have it. And
Yeah,
Christians, the
most
same
of them are
thing.
worse off than you are. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's any ideology can be weaponized.
Mm-hmm. Because
Any
people do it.
person,
Yeah.
yeah, any person can be radicalized.
Well, that's the great difference between someone with common sense and what basically like Marx tried to do, and progressives in general, left and right progressives. They think that you can change the human nature, that it's ideology that controls humans, and it's like no. And Jung even thought that too, that people don't have ideas, ideas have people, and it's like no, man, people choose how they react to ideas, and they choose what ideas they create. They choose what ideas they cultivate. The other side of that is there are some people who are schizophrenic or mentally way out of their brain, and or fed so many freaking pills that they're out of their brain, which there's an extremely high correlation of pharmaceutical use and mass shooters, mass killers, but we don't talk about that on the news for some reason. That's not, to
Hmm.
me, that's not an excuse. You at some point, I don't care what basically combination of crap you have in your body, when you choose to go drive, pull the trigger, and kill children, I mean, you're still guilty. I don't care. I'm not. That's, I mean, that's a whole other thing with death penalty and all that kind of stuff and schizophrenics. But it's like, man, I don't know. To me, schizophrenics, speaking strictly from that kind of view, and kind of people with, I guess, like natural um, mental illnesses, they don't. I don't think they tend to go off and plan for months to go do something like this. Like, I could be highly wrong, but I don't think that
And
happens.
those instances are, I think, even statistically compared in mass shootings as an example, I think those are pretty rare.
Yeah.
Like schizophrenia and that are fairly rare. I know that with all the research that's been done on serial killers and things like that, or mass like spree killers, things like that, a lot of times those people do have a startling amount of similarities in their
Yeah.
childhoods, in their backgrounds. They have a lot of the same indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and anybody who's done any kind of criminal profile or read any of that stuff knows, like setting fires, hurting animals and small children,
Bedwetting,
bedwetting at a later age, and
night terrors.
there's a whole
Yeah.
yeah, there's like a whole range of things that are indicators, but none of that stuff is saying that you don't still realize that what you're doing is wrong, and that you couldn't have help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me as a teacher, that's one of the biggest things that's always on my mind, because I have students that I interact with that are difficult students. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna try to say that all students or children are all just
Angels. Yeah.
sweet, perfect little kids. They're not. They're Some of them are fallen angels, but like I'm more intentional with the students that at an elementary school level are already showing that they're disturbed, because the reality is, what the 90% of the time these people who do this, yeah, everyone after it comes out will say, oh, I never, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see it coming, I never could have.
They were such a
that's
nice, quiet
that's
person.
yeah, that's you look at who they are and what they've been struggling with, and there's so much that parallels between all of these people,
Mm-hmm.
with the things they're struggling with, the behaviors that they exhibit, and they just keep slipping through the cracks and not being helped. There's something that a story that haunted me, and this I heard this when I was in college. taking all my art ed classes and things like that, and my education classes. And I had a professor, and I don't even remember which class it was, but I had a professor that was talking about, the psychology of students and kids and things like this that happen, and our responsibility as teachers and things. And he was telling a story about a student that had been at somewhere that I think that somewhere that he had taught, but this student was he was a high school kid, and he had spent like a month and a half building this elaborate construction in his bedroom of pulleys and things. He had looked up online how to build this thing that he could use, had tie a string to his foot or something and pull it, and it would set off the shotgun.
Oof.
And he killed himself that way.
Yeah.
But he had it spent like a pretty decent amount of money, like $50, gradually buying the stuff. Had spent a month constructing it in his bedroom. It was this big apparatus that filled up his whole room, and the parents were surprised when it happened.
Yeah.
That means that they haven't been in their kid's room. They haven't been in their kid's room in a month.
Yeah.
They haven't noticed. Hey, you keep coming back from the hardware store with what you got in there? Like, what are you doing? Like,
no interest in him.
Yeah, and these people who, like you said it, the quiet kid, that this is usually not somebody that's getting written up all the time and that's always in trouble. It's usually that kid that gets bullied, and they stop telling the teachers that they got bullied because every time they told them in middle school, hey, I'm being picked on, I'm being beat up at class, nothing ever happens. So they stop telling anybody, and they constantly are ignored and constantly are neglected and constantly are mistreated. And then we're surprised when they lash out. And that's, none of that is to say that they're justified in their actions.
Yeah.
Like, do not get me wrong. There is no justification for taking out your pain on someone else, but there is a responsibility in society to love your neighbor and to notice that your neighbor is in a dark place and to try to reach out and see what you can do to alleviate that. We keep creating these monsters, and it's not a Punisher comic book or a Doom or Call of Duty game that's creating these people. Marilyn Manson records aren't creating these people.
Yeah. Well, I do think Moral Decay is helping create some of these people. I don't know if
it's definitely accelerating that.
Yeah, I don't think it's in that kind of case, but an overall moral decay. And again, going back to, I mean, I will 100% blame the government for anything because that's their job. You're in the position of power. Power don't come without responsibility, but our entire governmental system is based on that, to have power without responsibility. So no, I do blame the government when you see a recurring pattern in the nation you're supposed to govern and you're not fixing it. That's your fault. That is 100% your fault in some degree. I mean, of course, it's the fault of the people who do it, but I'm saying from a position of leadership, that's your fault. You're failing.
Yeah, responsibility is shared.
It is. It's not singular.
There's different. There's tiers. There are tiers of responsibility, and I would agree with you. The government, if you're going to spy on us and you're going to constantly be looking at what we're writing, what we're putting out on social media, what we're listening to, and all this stuff, then somewhere in there, if you see a red flag, you should maybe, hey,
yeah, they don't care.
Problem.
Well,
of course they don't.
I guess what I'm saying is you assume that responsibility when you're in a position of leadership and power. I assume responsibility for my children. They are responsible for their own behavior, but I assume that responsibility. And then, of course, we can go into a Christian example of Christ and sin. That's the whole thing. It's your sin, but I'm assuming responsibility for it. And you're still judged for it if you don't allow me to assume responsibility for it. That's
I mean, if your 6-year-old throws a brick through my window and breaks my window, that 6-year-old's not the one that's going to pay to replace it.
Exactly. They can't.
So somebody's going to pay because I'm not fixing it.
Yeah. Well, all that to say, the government 100% created the mass fatherlessness in homes we see. because
Mm-hmm.
prior to certain measures they took, it didn't exist. It wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
major cultural shift like that happened overnight. And we know
Mm-hmm.
that's a major contributor. I'm not saying it's the only one. And of course, some people go off and they want to go off on the fatherlessness in the black community, and they ignore every other community. It's like, hey guys, I hate to tell you that, but that gap's catching up to the white community
Mm-hmm.
very quickly, which should tell you it's not just a
You can use the
it's
word
not
the
a
white population, maybe,
well in
but
black
I mean,
population. What I'm saying
but
is,
I know what you population
yeah,
is a better word, I guess. But I know exactly what you mean.
yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that's not some derived culture from race and blood that racists think on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It is a cultural
Mm-hmm.
thing, but guess what? It's not a black cultural thing, guys. It's an American cultural thing. And you know how we know
Mm-hmm.
that? Because this doesn't happen to different races, white, black, whatever, in other countries that don't have these kinds of policies and this kind of culture that we created. So
Mm-hmm.
all that to say,
Well, and
yeah,
the prison system
hmm
is big money, so we like to arrest daddies.
oh yeah, we like to get dads out of the house, get them not paying child
Mm-hmm.
support, and put them in prison. It doesn't matter what color they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we like children to be dumb, fat, and stupid and reliant on the government. Doesn't matter what
Yep.
color they are. Now, it may have been, if there were some sinister, like people believe, it may have started targeting one group, but it ain't satisfied with one group. So,
Exactly.
all that to say, uh, going back to Jung and people saying ideas, and people, that's the thing. People think that's that stupid secular or Gnostic, either one, progressive view is that basically people are determined like a deterministic worldview by their culture,
Mm.
and that's not how it works, man. People make culture, and when you
Mm-hmm.
flip that on its head and you say culture makes people, what you're doing is well, then who made the first culture? Either you believe in some Gnostic god that created it and has these like is limited in its power and it can't find itself and it needs people to do it, or you have to admit that people make culture, which means people have the capacity for good and evil, which means there's no fixing it. But to tie it back in with all of this, there is mitigation, and if
Mm-hmm.
there is a way to mitigate this, and the government just doesn't want to do it. They don't want to
I'm
do it.
saying that's the thing is that it and we already pointed this
Yeah, we
out,
already
so we
went
don't
over
need to
it.
beat
Yeah,
a dead horse. But I mean, it's not that hard. It's
yeah,
really not that hard to stop this from happening.
yeah. It's not. It
At least not at schools.
Well, and to go off on this, and not to give anybody any ideas, so I want to preface this by saying I am not condoning it, and I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But there's all if art and culture were creating this problem, there doesn't seem to be any mass shootings at conventions. Thank God. There doesn't seem to be mass shootings at any other locations. It's always schools. It's always these things. Like, why wouldn't it reflect? Like, if why wouldn't it reflect the thing that inspired them? You know what I mean?
I would say that the one exception to that was the dude that shut up the theater when the Dark Knight Return or Dark Knight Rises came out.
Yeah.
That was so like inspired by the Joker.
Well, we don't know
But
if
he
he
was like,
was. Like, I think that
well,
they,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's true. That could have been a little bit of a spin too. But
well, and they thought, remember, the media created a hype around the movie Joker, saying this is going to happen. And then when it didn't happen, they got all disappointed and mad. There was even a meme about it. It was like that kid poking like the thing, and it's like, "Come on, do a mass shooting," and like nothing happened.
yeah, yeah.
I guess I'm not trying to give anybody ideas, but first of all, those have security. These places we just named, thank God they
Hmm.
do, and they don't send the greater message. And the greater message, whether these mass shooters know it or not, is I hate everything, and I'm going to destroy the thing that is the most like God that I can think of, the most innocent, which is children.
Hmm.
Or better yet,
Hmm.
they're also thinking, what's the thing that'll get me on the news? So I don't think society
That's always
creates
the case.
evil, but society can certainly promote evil and it can certainly advertise it for clicks, which is what our society does do.
Right.
We also don't know. They also talk about like, there's no mass shootings like school shootings in other countries. Man, we don't know. First of all, there's a 90% of the world doesn't keep statistics like we do, like the Western world does.
This is
Second,
true. We love numbers.
second, they don't have schools the same way we do. They don't have the culture we have to do. They have weapons. Are you telling me that like India doesn't have like AR-15s just laying around? You're telling me like I know
Right.
not everybody has the Second Amendment. They have access to weapons. There's so many weapons like
Hmm.
in Mexico. It's ridiculous. They're just not documented. There's weapons all over the world. Japan has one of the biggest like underground like mob and mafia problems ever. They have a different. It's not the Second Amendment. Man, they have automated weapons. Psychopaths can get automated
Hmm.
weapons there. They could be shooting up
And
schools.
if they can't, they can kill you with a rock.
Yeah, and they've had their own problems. They've had guys trying to blow up buses and stuff. They've had death cults and all this kind of stuff. It's not
Hmm.
so easy to point to, oh, it's guns, because these guys can have guns and yet they're not committing these things.
Hmm.
We've had guns.
I think that other countries like to point at America for that because we have, all our John Wick movies, and we love to celebrate. We love a
How
good
many
gun
cultures?
violence.
Every single culture had warrior deities that they worshipped and warrior stories of
Exactly.
conquering. Japan had the samurai
Exactly.
for 1,000 years.
Dudes
They
chopping people's
fetishize the
heads off.
katana so much. We got the katana from them, like as far as the idea and
Of
the
course we did.
fetishization of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're telling me like no, it's a ridiculous idea because we
Oh,
always
it's a
hear
dumb argument. I'm just saying that they make it.
no. I get you. But I thought about that. I was like, no, that's a ridiculous idea. Especially when most of the world consumes that same media and loves it and then replicates it. No, it's
Yeah.
not. There is something in our culture. It's not the. I think the art can contribute to the moral decay, but there's something deeper, something that's already there that we're not addressing.
Well, and that's what, to go back to what I was saying earlier, these people who carry out these kinds of actions already want to do it.
Yeah, they want
The
something.
murder is in their heart. The hatred and the apathy, whatever you want to call it, neuropathy, whatever you want to call it, that they've already made up their mind they want to do something like this. Maybe they don't have all the details figured out, maybe they don't have the plan yet, but they're looking for a reason to do this.
Hmm. Or something
And
like it. Yeah.
anything that they can take and use to justify it or prop it up, they will. But that's on them. That's not on the creator of that comic book or that movie or whatever.
No, it's not on you to take response unless you're blatantly 100% causing stochastic terrorism, which I still don't 100% agree with as a concept because, free speech is free speech and it should stay that way.
Free speech is free speech, and free will is free will,
Yeah.
and people have a choice.
Yeah, just because a guy literally gets on a street corner and starts saying all the horrible things about a group of people doesn't mean he's responsible when someone goes and does terrible things that just hurt him. It
Right.
also doesn't mean that person that did it is a victim because of him. It means each
Hmm.
individual is responsible for the evil they did. You did spew evil into the world, and you will be judged for that on a cosmic scale. Maybe you should be judged for it in some way here. We have those kind of laws already in place without having to take away free speech. But I mean, this is what this is going. This is what this is. This is what this is going to be used for. It's going to be used to go after the Second Amendment, and it's going to be used to go after the First Amendment. It,
Yeah.
the opportunists don't care what side you're on. They're on their side. If you're on the gun grabbers, I mean, here's my thing. Here's my prediction, man. I think the opportunists, the social planners, like this to happen, so people call for gun control. When people call for gun control, they want to create, especially now that this strangely targeted Christian school, this idea of Christian nationalism is popping up so much. I think the opportunists want that reaction to happen so that we are balkanized even more. And I don't think they care
Mm-hmm.
which amendment gets taken away first or which right gets taken away first. I think they just want control. I think they
Imagine
yeah,
that.
I think they want overreactions from every single side of everything, from every single part of everything, and I think they like balkanization because when people give up their freedoms and give up their like understanding of each other, they want big daddy government to come in and take stuff.
I agree.
So it all that to say it's so sickening. I can't understand the evil that enters someone's heart to. And I'm not saying
Yeah,
do
I can't
this.
understand it. I can't
Yeah,
understand killing children. I really can't.
no, it's a. I don't know how dark you have to be in your soul to do that. You have to have had accepted that you're just you want to be dead, and it's like, well, if you want, there's ways to get that done without hurting other people.
Hmm.
Um,
I will say this though, as this stuff continues and as these kinds of things keep happening, I'd say that that's all the more reason to put good out into the world. That's all the
mm-hmm,
more reason to be passionate about creating something that maybe the person that is feeling all that darkness and hatred, maybe they find your whatever cool thing you make and put up on the internet, and
yeah,
that's enough to say, hey man, I could do something different. I could occupy myself with something better.
yeah. If the kid that built the pulley system to kill himself had taken a second to be inspired by his own work of the pulley system he'd made, maybe he
Hmm.
wouldn't have used it for that. And that may have been. I mean, hey, I'm not going to go into everything happens for a reason or that kind of stuff, but it's like maybe you could just a second to step back and maybe the thing that inspired me to do this, maybe there's some good in that I'm using it for wrong. I made
Hmm.
something. Maybe I can make something else instead of ending it
Hmm.
here. Yeah,
Well, I I don't guess there's any way of knowing, but I do think in that particular instance, I feel like that's somebody that if he wanted to end it quickly, he could have. I think he
yeah,
wanted somebody to see. I think that was a cry for help that never got answered, is what
yeah,
that was,
yeah.
which
And
is heartbreaking.
these things I don't understand, man. I mean, I don't understand them. The Dylan Roof one in particular at the church, which was
Yeah,
just
that one's.
atrocious. I don't know how you sit
Mhm.
with people, regardless of their
who,
religion or yours or race or ethnicity,
who
and
were
they
so kind to
and they
you.
pray with you. Like
Yeah,
they're asking their God for His providence on you, no matter like what. And then you're like, I'm gonna hurt these people.
yeah.
I don't get it. Um,
Mm.
which he actually was radicalized racially
Oh,
online.
but he was very much was
Yeah,
radicalized
and
online.
he had a major problem before that. And how do you know that? It's because anybody who could do that's got a major problem in them.
Well, I mean, you can look at and this Nashville shooter is no different, and I don't know when or if they will release
Her
any of those
manifesto.
details, but they always leave a manifesto behind, man. They always have like this laundry list of all the stuff that they hate and all the background. My thing is like, God knows there's got to be a way to see this stuff coming.
Yeah. Well, the fact that it's
I don't
not,
know how you I don't know how these people sneak up on us.
they don't. I don't think they do, man. I don't think they do. I think that way more is known and people fail because even with this one, she had texted somebody like either the night before, or the day before, and that person didn't tell anybody. I'm not saying they should be prosecuted, but man, when she's like, whatever it was, like something like, I'm probably gonna be dead and I'll be on the news. It's like you should probably, at least for concern for your friend, you should call the cops.
Do a welfare check.
The one time I had like a friend of
Yeah.
mine, he like called me all depressive and stuff, and he was saying this like I drove like 45 minutes to his house, and it turns out he had OD'd on coke. And I had already
Mm-hmm.
called his parents and called the cops, and I mean, it basically saved
Mm-hmm.
his life. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not patting me on the back. It's just like you, like if what kind of
You
failing,
can't
you know?
ignore stuff. Yeah, to
Yeah,
anybody that's listening, like never just take for granted that somebody's joking.
yeah.
You can't ignore stuff like that.
I'd
You
rather lose a
can't ignore
friendship
stuff
than
like
lose a
that.
friend.
Exactly. And the thing is, so many people will say in the looking back, well, oh yeah, they made this statement or that statement. I thought that was kind of weird. You don't think you should follow up on that?
Yeah, you don't think you have
Like,
some
hey, dude,
concerns with
what are
that?
you talking about? Yeah, like what's going on here? Why what are you thinking? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, we should talk about this. You know,
Like that Paddock guy that in Mandalay Bay that shut out all those people at that concert a couple of years ago in Las Vegas.
yeah.
Like they you'll never convince me they didn't know he was coming.
Or there was more involved because that story doesn't add up at all. If we're gonna go
It
into it,
doesn't.
no, nothing about
I
that
don't want to
story
go
adds up.
go
Yeah,
into it, but it does. You can't tell me that. I believe that a lot of times they see these people coming, and I think a lot of times they go ahead and they have the spin planned out from the get go.
yeah,
They step aside and let the stuff happen. That's the thing. They step
yeah.
aside and let this stuff happen, and then they spin it and they've already got it prepared. They already know exactly what they want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason why most of these shooters don't survive.
Yep.
And they all supposedly end their own lives, and maybe they do, maybe they don't.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me that when they go in there that they don't try to take them alive very often.
Yeah.
Because that a dead enemy, a dead monster, you can put words in their mouth. You can analyze them.
Well. Also, if you're an officer and you get a shot, and this person's got a weapon,
Oh,
yeah, you do
yeah.
it.
I mean, you're gonna take it. Yeah, you're gonna
Well,
take it.
and
But
not to go off tangent, but we are trying to wind down here. I am gonna say this to you and everybody that sees it. Like this is like the kind of episode I'm not gonna make like a thumbnail for or like promote on social media. Like it'll be uploaded, but it feels wrong
yeah,
to promote it. You know what I mean? Like it feels
yeah,
wrong to
yeah. It's a discussion worth having. But no,
yeah.
I agree with you. This isn't one we're probably gonna hit the share button on.
No, and it just doesn't feel. I mean, if we ever got monetized, I wouldn't monetize this episode.
Yeah,
That
that's
just
fair
feels
too.
wrong, you know. But
Yeah, but
yeah, and
I do think there's value in talking about this stuff.
well, I'm gonna say this. Like, this is a personal thing, but the thoughts and prayers stuff has become a meme because
Hmm.
empty, mean people like to be cynical and bitter and like to politicize things. Thoughts and prayers built entire societies and withheld them.
Hmm.
There's not a society that can be built without a religion, and you need to build it on a good religion. And Steve and I went into Christian nationalism. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about Christians having their own nation. I'm saying you can't help but have a religion when you build a nation. Thoughts and prayers are not pointless and useless. I don't care which religion you're a part of, because thoughts and prayers become actions, and they're the definition of
Yeah,
actions. This person who
yeah.
did
Thoughts and
this
prayers.
person who did this had thoughts and prayers. They were just terrible.
Hmm. Thoughts and prayers, and again, you can make it a bumper sticker slogan if you want to, but like thoughts and prayers are, you know, they're laser focused empathy.
Yeah, their
And if it's
intentions.
genuine empathy, yeah, their intentions that are being focused through prayer, and whether you believe in a higher power or not, if you care about somebody in a situation enough to take time and to focus on that person, when most of the time we don't focus on anybody but ourselves,
Hmm.
there's no way that that's a bad thing. And if it's genuine, it usually will lead to doing something good to try to help somebody.
If you want to break this apathetic, evil, and even soon to be like virtual dystopia we're in, thoughts and prayers are the way to do it. Because
Yeah, caring.
those are the things that no one can control, and those are the things you can't advertise to or you can't monetize. It's taking the
Hmm.
time to think, wish, and hope for the best and plead for the best for someone else at the expense of your own time and dignity. because thoughts and
Yeah.
prayers throughout history have been wailing and lamentations and ripping of clothing
Mm-hmm.
and
Kneeling,
great personal sacrifice.
yeah, a posture of humility and beseeching on somebody else's behalf.
The people that want to scream for political change and monetize everything for themselves hate thoughts and prayers because they know they are not they're not doing it right. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about them. That's why they can't stand
Right.
it. I'm not trying to be cruel or mean here, guys. And I get the meme. I get it. It's stupid. You need to find a better one.
Mm.
You need to just admit that you
Yeah.
don't like the political views of people who say, "Wait a minute, I'm before I make a loud mouth talk about this and say something stupid, I'm going to think of the people who were involved in this, including the shooter, and hope for the best for their soul as well, even though on this side of
Mm-hmm.
eternity they do deserve condemnation."
Right.
You can hold both of those things to be true, to hope for the redemption of
Mm-hmm.
evil while condemning it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because anyway, not to go off on a tangent, but this is it's just too
No,
heavy and
but
it's like I
that's
know it's a
okay.
joke. I love to laugh at everything. I know like we're gonna shift this like a light, easy discussion, about school shootings. But I mean, I have two children, and like there's not a day that goes by when one of them goes to school, I don't feel like I'm gonna have to use the pistol in my car to go get them. I hope not. I hope that never happens. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that's why it's there, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but no, like I think the world, as cheesy as it sounds, the world needs more thoughts and prayers. And at this point, I don't care where they're directed as long as they're not directed at you, at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want to plug anything really. We start off every podcast the same, introducing who we are, but if you watch us at all, or if you found that we do have stuff that we do create art, and I don't know, I would like to say like I would encourage, like you saying, encourage people to make art. You
Yeah,
know,
go make something beautiful.
yeah, go do
Or
something
even if
cool.
it's not something beautiful, go make something that makes you feel something.
Yeah, because it might make someone else feel something.
Right. And don't if you're in a bad place, and don't just stay there. Like, more people care about you than you realize. If you're struggling, if you're drowning, like, ask for help.
And if you know people and you feel like they don't care about you, that doesn't mean that the entire world won't always not care about you.
Yeah, and and if you have nobody, if you just genuinely have nobody, find me.
Yeah,
I'm not hard to find online. If you have nobody in your life that you can talk to, find me.
yeah,
Because, like, the last thing anybody wants is for you to hurt yourself or hurt somebody else or do something that you can't take back. It's not that drastic. It's not worth it. Reach out, get some help, talk through some of this stuff. Like, don't bottle that stuff up and then explode on people.
yeah. Don't, yeah. And as someone whose family has multiple suicides in it, your life and death affect other people, whether you know it or not.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna say two things. Like suicide is the most selfish thing you can do. That doesn't mean I don't get why people do it. Um,
Hmm.
but it's unbelievably selfish, and
Hmm.
at the same time, you don't know like how good everything could be, you know. And things may always
Hmm.
suck, but they don't have to be that bad. I mean, if I have to throw in a joke, I mean, it's all going to end sometime anyway. Like, you might as well, you might as well give it a chance because I mean, death's coming for you
Right.
one way or another.
Well, the what I've always had, the way I've always heard it is like, the only thing you do by ending your life is remove any possibility of things getting better.
Yeah, but I would say it also makes a lot of other people's lives worse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
it not only ends the good for yours, but it makes a lot of other people hurt too, whether they even knew they would be
Mm-hmm.
hurt or not.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, I just gotta end it there. I don't know if I can keep going, man. But
That's fine. That's fair.
yeah, we'll see you guys some other time. And again, if you find this one, you know, that's great. I'm not gonna say share it, like, subscribe, and all that stuff. I'm just saying if you find it, I hope it did something good for you. I'll catch you later.
Yep.